Alright, so I just finished the Destiny 2 beta this weekend, and I have to say, I'm both impressed and unimpressed at the exact same time. Given the fact that this is a beta for the game that isn't coming out until close to be September, as there isn't a concrete date as of yet, it's just September, I can't judge every aspect of this game. All I can do is judge the opening mission, the single strike, and the crucible modes that they had available during the time that the beta was going. I will also cover the gameplay aspect, as there are a few small differences between Destiny 1 and 2, and as I have done with all these videos, I will close with my final thoughts. Also, full disclaimer, I did play this beta on the PS4 as my Xbox One was out of commission during this beta's run. Thank you, moron. First and foremost, I will say that there will be some very mild spoilers ahead as it does pertain to the first mission that was included in the beta. The mission starts off as a well-rendered cutscene where you see the Cabal, as it's sort of obvious from the design of their ships, launching an assault on the tower and the city itself. A bunch of missiles get launched at the tower and pretty much everything is destroyed, hence your weapons and armor getting deleted and not carrying over, leaving a burning wreck. The character you select during the start screen shows up at the destroyed tower. You run through the wreckage, killing Cabal, and eventually meet up with old buddies like Zavala and Cade 6 and the other person I can't remember off the top of my head, and battle through the tower's wreckage until you have to go assault a Cabal ship. While you're going through the mission, you get exposition from your ghost and other characters about this new Cabal faction. I say faction as they're technically a part of the Cabal, but not the Cabal you fought in the first Destiny. Anyway, Miss Amanda Holliday flies you through another beautifully rendered cutscene and drops you on the command ship the Cabal are using for their assault. Although why they didn't use that starfish-like ship instead is another question altogether for another time as their command ship. Although, as you fight your way through the ship, you meet enemies both old and new alike. Some return enemies are the Legionnaires, Centurions, Scion, and Phalanx Troopers. Then there's a new one that you run into called the Incendior Trooper, which wields flamethrowers, and there is another trooper type that only appears in the Strike in this beta, but I'll mention that when I get to it. Back to the story, you make your way through to a shield generator room and you blow up some turbines. Once you do, you are treated to another well-rendered cutscene where you see the Traveler wrapped in some sort of wire, there's no other way to really describe it, by the starfish-looking ship, and your light is taken away from you, leaving you completely vulnerable and weak, like you were at the beginning of Destiny 1, so I guess that kind of makes sense from a gameplay perspective. The Cabal guy then kicks you off the edge of the ship, and that is the end of the campaign for the beta, as it fades to black. So I can easily gather from this game that the story will focus more on the Cabal. Why? Well, in the first Destiny game, you primarily focused on the Vex, as the Black Garden was going to be the end of the Traveler and even your ghost by proxy. Primarily all the DLC for Destiny, sans the Rise of Iron, was focused on the Hive and with the Crota raid and missions, and the Taken King expansion was focused more on Crota's dad Oryx, who was not only the king of the Hive for as far as we know, as far as I've read inside the Grimoire cards, and his personal army called the Taken. We learn about the Vex, the Taken, and Hive, and the Fallen, thanks to the Wolves and the Rise of Iron expansions in the first game, so it makes sense the Cabal would get their turn in Destiny 2. One big thing that worries me about this is we'll get more expansions like the first game with the other factions instead of just including inside the base game itself, forcing us to buy obscenely overpriced DLC for little amounts of content. Expansions 1 and 2. If there's one thing I hope for in the DLC, it's like Witcher 3's, where it adds to the story itself instead of leaving vital information out that should have been in the story to begin with. The game is complete with the base game. You don't even need the DLC to understand the entire story, unlike Mass Effect 3 with their Day 1 Protean DLC. In The Witcher 3, the DLC adds to the already complete stories like all DLC expansions should do. I don't mind DLC that adds to the already completed story, but not DLC that places story that was cut out in the first place in order to make easily made DLC that you could shill out. But to finish this section off, I think it was a well-made story mission, and hopefully this reflects well on the rest of the game. So the Strike. What is a strike for those just turning their attention to Destiny? A strike is a 3-man mission with either friends or random match-made people over your online platform of choice. The mission primarily consists of running through several areas, which could include platforming, lots of ads, a mini-boss, and possibly mini-boss, and a final boss. These strikes can also be ramped up in difficulty in the first game in order to achieve exclusive loot that mission-specific item is needed for a quest like an exotic weapon, a quest like the Sleeper Simulant, or which require you to do an exclusive high-level strike that can only be completed while the quest was active, which struck the final piece in order to complete the weapon. If my suspicions are correct, then Bungie might implement something similar to what it was in the first game. But back to this strike in particular. This strike centers around the Cabal assaulting a Vex stronghold where they are trying to find something specific. You assault a massive drill and walk down a giant hole which the drill is going in. You dodge giant grinders and make your way inside the Vex stronghold and find what the Cabal are after all. Protheon, the Modular Mind, aka Atheon's tentacle hentai-loving brother, or something because he has those ethereal tentacles on his back. Now there's one thing I really like about this strike mission is that the final boss is like a multi-stage fight. You fight on platforms that will eventually fall away, leading deeper into the Vex stronghold until you're on the ground level, which is surrounded by a Vex milk slurry. That's the only way I can really describe it. I really do like this. It's unique and makes it to be a strike mission that you'll remember because it's unique and not like a lot of other missions where just rinse and repeat. Kill the boss and enemies and their buddies type missions. You know the type. Let's, for a moment, look back at Destiny's strike missions. You have the Devil's Lair, the Will of Crota, Fallen Saber, Sepix Perfected, Wretched Eye, the Summoning Pits, the Shadow Thief, Blighted Chalice, the Abomination Heist, the Nexus, Winter's Run, Echo Chamber, which is a PlayStation exclusive, Cerberus Vey 3, the Dust Palace, the Undying Mind, Shield Brothers, and the Sunless Cell. Out of all of these, which were the most memorable? For me, personally, the ones that really stood out were the Nexus, the Dust Palace, and the Wretched Eye. Do you know why? Because they're sitting in areas where something you couldn't normally get to. Sure, the same could be said for the rest of the strikes, but for the most part, those felt like areas you could have walked into given the right circumstances. I love the vista you get on Mars during the Dust Palace strike when you complete it. I love the atmosphere of the Wretched Eye strike where we went deeper into the Cosmodrome's Plaguelands to see more of the pre-Darkness Golden Age humanity, what they were doing down there. The Nexus I like because it showed that the Vex were around during the Golden Age and the researchers wanted to learn more about them, like all curious humans would like to. The rest of it felt like a rinse and repeat until you get to the bosses. You remember the bosses, but do you remember how you got there? Was it all a blur for you, or do you remember all of it? I know I can't, it kind of blurred for me. For me, for the most part, it felt repetitive, but this strike, it felt fresh. Not because it was a new game, but because of the way the entire strike was designed. You remember fighting on a drill and fighting Atheon's tentacle hentai-loving brother on vanishing platforms. You'll remember that. There are 2 new confirmed enemy units added to Destiny 2. The first, obviously, was the Incinerator, which I mentioned before, but 2 for this strike that were mentioned and shown are the Gladiator for the Cabal. This specific enemy is like the Vandals for the Fallen, and they are the melee enemies with lots of health that will fuck you up if they get close to you. Second one is the War Beast, also from the Cabal, that acts like another easily killable ad like the Grunts from Halo that will easily fuck you over if too many gang up on you. As for the Vex, we confirm that this strike, the Goblins, Hobgoblins, Minotaurs, and Harpies will be making a return in Destiny 2. We didn't see any other enemy types in this strike, so we have no idea if the Fallen and Hive are going to make a return or not. In the end, I thought that the strike was really good, and I hope this is the model in which they're designing all future strikes. If they have the same level of design that this one had, there's hope that all strikes will be interesting and memorable. For all of you returning players of Destiny, you know what the Crucible is. It's the multiplayer PvP game mode of the game. Now, I know that there is one other game mode which happened to be Control, but they have for sure added a new game type called Countdown, which is an extremely familiar game type if you've had played any Call of Duty game, Modern Warfare onwards. So, what's the point of this game type? You have to either kill the enemy team or plant and defend the charge. Sound familiar yet? No. Really? It's Search and Destroy. It's pretty much like Search and Destroy, except you have 3 weapons, and you have superpowers that can decimate an entire team. Overall, one of my biggest complaints about Destiny Crucible is that overall, it's a highly unbalanced game mode in my opinion. What do I mean? Let's look back to Bungie's previous work, the Halo franchise. This is something that MLG used to play a bunch in. You don't really see that in Destiny, but that's a different story. In that game, the multiplayer was extremely balanced by giving competitors specific weapons to start off with and making each spawn in the beginning completely equal with only the skill of the opponents apart. Power weapons were placed strategically to allow either side to gain control of them, forcing each competitor to think strategically in order to access these weapons before an enemy or before they could use them against them. But with Destiny, it seems like all that strategy placement went out the window. I don't mind the PvP level design, as it is quite good. But the levels are constantly reused, and some of the levels are really good for one game type, but horrid for another. Another disadvantage is that the whole weapon abilities that each weapon has can upset the delicate balance that exists between each player, as players have to rely on weapon rolls instead of pure skill. There's a reason why Destiny players brag about god rolls online, in parties, in forums, Reddit, etc. So instead of getting killed by the better player, lag, or general BS that you claim, you're getting killed by a lucky SOB that's got a good roll on a weapon. This kind of thing keeps me away from Crucible in general. One of the things you need to know about me is that I dislike a lot of PvP game types, as there is a huge skill gap that can occur, especially when you're just jumping in. That and those of us who actually work for a living can't just stream to get cash and play constantly. There are a few comics, like one from Dorkly, that explain my exact feelings on this perfectly. I might have it on screen. You get the game, then you have to go to work at some point. You have to go to sleep. Then you come home, and pretty much everyone without a life is the highest rank in prestige, have all the weapons, have all the camos, making it hard for you to really compete. You just feel disenfranchised. You feel bad. Not really bad, but you feel cheated, in a sense. This is the primary reason I have a love-hate relationship with Overwatch and a lot of other multiplayer-focused online games. Well, for the gameplay, I'm going to sum it up like this. It's exactly like Destiny 1, except now your second class now has new abilities. So, for my hunter I'll use during the gameplay, which is probably playing in the background right now, that I acquired during the beta, he or she now has a staff instead of knives for the Blade Dancer subclass, now named Arcstrider. The Titan now has the Sentinel subclass, which creates a void shield that you can attack or defend with, and the Warlock has the Dawn Blade subclass, which allows you to attack with a Blade of Fire. The biggest criticism I had at the time that I saw the character selection screen was that, is this the same game with just a shinier coat of paints? I mean, you have the exact same character classes you had before. And as I mentioned during the whole story mission segment, this game is gorgeous. I mean, Bungie pulled out their A game for their modeling teams. The scenery and weapons look amazing. I love how the ammo drops now look, and the one thing I really wanted to see was the engram drops to see how they changed, and it's a little too bad I didn't get to see them. All in all, it's the same thing for the previous Destiny based on what we were presented during this beta. There wasn't much any notable changes between Destiny 1 and 2. The biggest addition to Destiny 2 based on the beta was the addition of SMGs as a weapon type. The weapon slots are now changed from primary, secondary to heavy to kinetic, elemental, and power weapons. Meaning you could hypothetically have two of the same weapon types in your first two slots as long as the second had an elemental effect to it. Weapons can now be equipped in the first two slots are auto rifles, scout rifles, pulse rifles, hand cannons, sidearms, and SMGs. Shotguns, rocket launchers, grenade launchers, and sniper rifles, and fusion rifles, and swords are now all considered power weapons. Ironically, a shocking twist of events in the comparison I initially compared to Halo earlier is now power weapons. So, yeah, I guess there's some hope after all for me. The gameplay is still pretty snappy, as it was with Destiny 1, despite me using a different console and a different controller at the time, and being completely unfamiliar with it. It works like it's supposed to, and there's nothing wrong with the controls. The only thing I have a complaint about was the grenade regeneration speed, which I'm pretty sure Armor Worlds will take care of in the game's initial release, but all in all, the game played pretty well. So, what are my final thoughts on this beta? Honestly, I'm still not convinced to spend $60+ to buy the game as well as the Season Pass. While the first mission was decent for a first mission, it wasn't enough to convince me. The strike was pretty good, however, again, it wasn't enough to convince me. Finally, the Crucible, a PvP game mode which I'm biased against, wasn't enough to convince me. I will need to see more in the coming month or so in footage, in gameplay, etc. to outright convince me to purchase the game. I mean, I personally pre-ordered Destiny 1 and bought all the DLC for it. I ended up spending $130 plus local tax on this game. I blindly spent the initial $80 in tax on the game for both the game and the Season Pass, which included the two small DLC expansion packs, hoping that the same quality Bungie had in the Halo franchise when their DLC came out and their games would carry over, even though they were managed by Activision and not Microsoft. And now excuse me for a moment while I go on for a rant. Yes, people hate rants, but this does need to be said. So back in Destiny, Activision gave PlayStation hyper-exclusive strikes and content to PlayStation only, forcing a bit of contention between the consoles that, once again, didn't need to be there. Eventually, that exclusive content was brought to Xbox in subsequent DLCs to allow Xbox players to experience it. In fact, there is still one strike that is completely exclusive to PS4 that you cannot play on Xbox One, even though the game is going to be pretty dry in a few months once Destiny 2 drops, called the Echo Chamber on Venus. This strike will be exclusive to PlayStation until fall 2017. And in the kicker, it's all from the King's Fall, the Taken King DLC. That's right, a strike that's well over a year old is still exclusive to PlayStation, and Xbox is finally going to get it right as the game is about to die. Real fantastic work there, Bungie. Congratulations and kudos there. And that's one thing that's pissing me off about Activision right now. My question is whether or not this was a deliberate move by Activision to make them an exclusive deal through PlayStation, or whether Bungie themselves signed the exclusive agreement with Sony to make those strikes and content exclusive only to PlayStation. The reason this annoys me is because this content does have Grimoire cards, which contains more story that Xbox players miss out on. I mean, I have no problem with companies giving early access content on platforms that pay them more to host it there first. No issue with that whatsoever. I know back during Modern Warfare 2, the DLC released early on Xbox 360 and would release a short time later on all platforms, usually a month or two. No more than that. It was shitty for the other fans. Yeah, it was really shitty, but it was not as bad as this. I mean, several sources have confirmed well over a year ago that the Taken King content would finally drop this year, as well as any remaining exclusive content dropping around the time Destiny 2 does. That's well over a year plus to wait for content that's now irrelevant and unpopulated thanks to the new game, including exclusive weapons, multiplayer maps, story missions, and a strike. And now there are reports from back in June that Destiny 2 players on the Xbox One and PC won't be getting any exclusive PS content until 2018, which includes a multiplayer map, an exotic rifle known as the Borealis rifle, and the Lake of Shadow strike. 2018, or even 2019 if Sony might have their way. Jesus, Bungie, you're really going to be pissing on the console players that built your company up and put you on the map in the first place. I mean, if this is Bungie's decision, then fuck you, Bungie. If this is Activision, then fuck you, Activision. This is an outright wrong fucking deal for anyone who isn't on the PlayStation. Sony, please go fornicate yourself, preferably with a rusty iron pike. This is fucking wrong. If you want exclusive content, then have it for a month or two, nothing more. If it's anything more than that, the content loses relevance for everyone outside the PlayStation. Releasing it a year later for your competition will not help you win anyone over. If anything, that will make them hate you even more. If anything, Xbox and PC users should be getting a discount for any additional content removed for exclusivity reasons. If they're going to cut content like that and expect me to pay full price, then they're absolutely insane to sell it to me that I might get to play it in 2018 or 2019. Fuck you, Sony, and this rotten-ass deal you've given Bungie and or Activision. If you want to read the two articles in their full context, I provided links to the archive web pages and the original articles from Polygon and VG247 in case the original pages get deleted for whatever reason. Rant over. But anyway, Bungie is going to have to sell me on Destiny 2 more, especially when there's going to be exclusive content missing in order for me to pony up $60 plus. But what do you guys all think? Were you impressed by the beta, or were you a little bit let down? Are you excited for the game? Does the year-long wait for exclusive content piss you off, especially those of my Xbox brethren and PC cousins? Let me know down in the comments below. Like and subscribe, make sure to hit that notification bell if you want to see more videos from me, because obviously YouTube may or may not show them to you if you subscribe. But anyway, I've been Philly Cheesesteak, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video.